Okay, imagine you're a detective trying to solve a literary mystery that's literally been around for centuries. Now, what if your partner wasn't a historian, but a computer? We're about to dive into what happens when ancient tradition, first written on fragile palm leaves, meets the incredible power of modern artificial intelligence.
And really, our whole journey today boils down to this one single question. Can a machine, an AI, actually solve a literary puzzle that has stumped scholars for hundreds of years?
And believe me, the scale of this thing is just massive. We're talking about 18 epic Sanskrit texts. We're talking millions of verses, all supposedly organized by one very controversial system. This is the story of that system and how a computer finally put it to the test.
All right, so first things first, let's talk about the texts themselves. This is Section 1, an ancient cosmic library, also known as the Fifth Veda for the people.
So, what exactly are the Mahapuranas? Well, the name itself means the Great Ancients, and they are this absolutely colossal collection of Sanskrit literature. I mean, get this, there are over 4 million verses in total. The whole point was to take the really deep, complex ideas of the Vedas and make them accessible to everybody through amazing stories about gods, kings, and the creation of the universe itself. Now, to really get these texts, you have to understand their blueprint. Traditionally, for a text to be considered a true Purana, it was supposed to cover these 5 core topics, the Panchalakshana. You've got the creation of the universe, its recreation, the family trees of gods and sages, these huge cosmic cycles, and the histories of royal families. It's basically the checklist for a complete cosmic encyclopedia.
But it's not quite that simple. And that brings us to Section 2, the 3 qualities mystery. This is where a really fascinating philosophical puzzle comes into play.
See, deep inside this massive library of stories, one particular text, the Padma Purana, made a really bold claim. It decided to sort all 18 of these major works into 3 very distinct moral categories. These categories, called gunas, set up a very clear hierarchy. At the top, you have sattvika, or goodness, for texts that glorified the god Vishnu. In the middle, rajasika, or passion, for texts focused on Brahma. And then, at the bottom, you have tamasika, or darkness. This was controversially assigned to texts dedicated to Shiva, which the Padma Purana basically said would lead you to ignorance.
So we have to ask, right? Was this some deep, philosophical insight into the nature of these texts? Or was it something more like ancient religious rivalry? I mean, the plot really thickens when you find out that other texts have totally different lists and traditions that honor Shiva. Well, they just flipped this whole hierarchy upside down.
Yeah, modern scholars have been pretty skeptical for a long time. One even called this whole classification system entirely fanciful. And maybe the biggest giveaway? The Padma Purana, the text that came up with this ranking? Well, it conveniently placed itself and all its buddies right there in the top, purest category. Funny how that works, huh?
So how in the world do you get to the bottom of a mystery like this? Well, you turn to technology. Welcome to Section 3, From Palm Leaf to Pixel. This is all about digital archaeology.
You know, these texts have had an unbelievably long life. They started out as oral traditions, passed down through generations. Then they were written down over centuries, and they kept changing and evolving all the way up to the 16th century. It's this long, messy history that makes them so tough to analyze. But today, finally, we can digitize them and let a computer take a look. But that's way easier said than done. I mean, just think about it for a second. How do you teach a computer to read a really complex, ancient language from manuscripts that are often falling apart or damaged, with different handwriting styles from different regions? That's the huge technical challenge right there. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how the researchers pulled this off. Section 4 is all about teaching a machine Sanskrit, which is kind of like being a high-tech linguistic detective.
So one of the first big problems is a really unique feature in Sanskrit called sandhi. It's where words literally smash together. So a simple phrase like, the glorious Brahma said, which is 3 distinct words, Shri Brahma Uvacha, it gets written down as one long, smooshed-together word, Shri Brahma Uvacha. The AI's very first job is to learn how to break these apart to find the actual words.
And this is all just one part of a bigger process, what's called a natural language processing pipeline. First, you digitize the manuscripts. Then comes that super important sandhi splitting. After that, the text is broken up into individual words, or tokens. And finally, you do something called lemmatization, where you reduce words to their root.
So all the different versions of the name Rama, for example, all get simplified back to just the root word Rama. Okay, once all that prep work is done, the real analysis can start, and it uses a technique called topic modeling. The easiest way to think about this is to imagine the AI as a super fast, super smart librarian. It reads all 18 books at the exact same time and automatically starts sorting words into piles or topics based on which words tend to show up near each other.
But how many topics should it look for? 3? 10? 100? Well, the researchers tested the AI to find the most meaningful number of themes. What you're seeing here is a chart of the coherence score. It's just a way to measure how good the topics are. And you can see it peaks right at 5. That told them that 5 core themes give the cleanest, most logical structure hidden in all that data.
And here they are, the 5 key topics the AI found all by itself. We've got cosmogony and creation, royal genealogy, Vedic rituals, stories about Vishnu, and stories about Shiva. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should. This looks a whole lot like that traditional 5-part structure of the Puranas we talked about earlier. The machine was actually finding a structure that made perfect sense.
And that, my friends, brings us to the moment of truth. Section 5, the computer's verdict. This is where we put the AI's findings head-to-head with ancient tradition.
So, after all of that high-tech analysis, does the data actually back up that ancient classification system of goodness, passion, and darkness? The answer? A big, resounding no. The AI's analysis, which was totally unbiased, it didn't care about centuries of tradition, found absolutely no clear statistical pattern that matched those Sattvika, Rajasaka, and Tamasaka groups. The clusters just weren't in the data.
And so the computer's verdict really supports what a lot of scholars had suspected all along. The guna classification system wasn't some objective philosophical truth about the texts. It was almost certainly a tool for marketing, a way for one religious tradition to promote its own scriptures above the others. Case closed.
And this leaves us with a really fascinating thought to end on. If AI can help us see this ancient library in a completely new light, just imagine what other secrets are just sitting there, waiting in our vast literary history, ready to be unlocked by the next wave of technology.